All righty, welcome everyone. And so we are doing a reading from Mark's Gospel, and it is the story of a woman who is healed in an unconventional way. And so without further ado, I also welcome anyone joining us online. And why don't we begin with a word of prayer? God of grace and everlasting glory, we draw near and know that you are waiting even now with your spirit of wisdom to bless us and grace us and to fill us. And we give you thanks for that and pray that we may faithfully follow your spirit and live our lives as disciples of the risen Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. All righty, so hi, Jim. Welcome. That's okay. You might want to go that way unless you want to be on camera. You want to be on camera? Yeah, that's all right. All righty. So let us begin.
And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment, for she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease."
All righty. Questions, comments, and conundrums?
How many organizations have based faith healing on this?
Have based faith healing on this?
As opposed to seeing physicians?
Oh.
Christian Scientist?
Christian Scientists,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So yes, you're making reference to the fact that she had gone to all of these doctors, spent everything she had. Sounds familiar, like modern medicine, doesn't it? And you know what the definition of emergency surgery is?
No.
The doctor needs the surgeon needs a new Lexus.
That would do it.
But yes, clearly. The doctors were of no help to her, and it is a faith healing, absolutely. And I don't think it has to be either or.
I agree.
I think back then, physicians tried to really help him.
That's true. That's true. Yes, modern medicine can do a whole lot more than they were able to do back then. Good morning.
My experience is both.
We have another walk by.
You want to go to see?
No. Yes, Tom.
The skies will stick together.
Uh,
I'm kind of, how should I say, I'm a little bit intrigued and also troubled a little bit by verse 30, where Jesus feels that, like, the Energizer Bunny, I'm getting a little power drain.
mhm.
And is there, in this parable story, is that the only time that Jesus kind of says that by healing or something, he feels like a dip in his energy source or something in his meter?
There's other places where it's like on rest or something.
I'm trying to remember another story where Jesus says he feels power go out of him.
Exactly.
And what troubles you about that,
Well,
Tom?
I mean, it's almost, well, kind of like Jesus is then how does he get recharged? Or kind of, it kind of, begs a question about like, does he kind of like have to, rev up the little generator to get back going again or something,
Or maybe it's instantaneous.
or maybe it's instantaneous.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
other thing is that if I remember correctly, one of the beliefs particularly in the Middle of Ages, that if a commoner or somebody needed a cure, that by touching the hem of the garment of a nobility of the king or something
Oh.
had healing properties.
Yeah.
Is that? I think
I'm sure that that belief is tied into this.
Yeah.
And remember in the Middle Ages, and actually up until probably the 1800s, there was the belief in divine right. And so monarchs were chosen by God. And so therefore they had.
Isn't there a hymn where we have a line in it, touch me now?
Thy garment's hem.
Garment.
Draw us in the Spirit's
Oh,
tether.
right, of course,
Yep,
yes.
yep.
Thank you.
Touch we now thy garment's hem.
Right.
Yeah. And, I'm not troubled by the fact that Jesus feels power go out of him.
Right, yeah.
It's not saying that he feels diminished by that. It's sort of like, just came to mind in Star Wars, Obi-Wan says, I feel a disruption in the Force.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Jesus, let's
I
no.
always kind of like that, 'cause it's a little like,
Yeah.
It makes it seem like, it's like cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well,
It makes it real.
let's not forget that Jesus is fully human.
Yeah.
And we know that there were times where people were clamoring about him, and he went off and prayed and spent some alone time with God. And he needed to do that because he had to recharge his spiritual batteries. So I'm not troubled by the fact that he feels power go out of him. What I'm troubled by is why this woman didn't go up to Jesus the way everybody else did and say, heal me, heal me.
Poor self-esteem.
Pardon me?
Poor self-esteem.
Poor self-esteem. Well, why would she have poor self-esteem?
She wasn't
Yep.
married or she was a widow and had no
Yeah.
standing or
She'd already spent
whatever.
all her
Yep.
Was there any, because she was probably Jewish.
Oh, definitely she was Jewish.
And was there anything, was she ashamed of her female condition? In other
Yeah.
words, wasn't there
The red tent.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That
So,
it was-
yes.
It was almost an embarrassing thing and it.
requiring a ritual.
Yes. So
Yeah.
let me.
There's still stigma and there's still health things that affect women are not, like, there's no medicine around.
Yeah. So in Judaism, and even Orthodox Judaism today, when a woman has her menstrual cycle, she is ritually unclean. And there's a whole ritual that she has to go through with bathing and whatnot. And I can tell you, when I was in Jerusalem back in 1978, I was there for 2 months, and Orthodox Jews would not sit on the bus because they had no way of knowing if the woman sitting next to them was experiencing her period, or if a woman who was experiencing a period had sat there before, recently. So this woman has a major problem though, okay? And she has been experiencing a discharge of blood for 12 years, okay? And so you're right, Leslie, she has low self-esteem. She has been stigmatized. And for 12 years, she has had to live with the belief that there were those who saw her as ritually unclean. impure, less than. There was something bad about it. And so this woman, I'm willing to bet you, was not from this community. Okay? Because
They would have known her.
They would have.
they would have, right. So if anybody in the crowd knew her, she would have been at great risk. They would have potentially gone to the extreme of stoning her. Okay. So because of all of this, she can't go up to Jesus face to face and say, "Hey, Lord, I got this medical condition here. Can you heal me?" And, people are going to want to know what the medical condition was. So she has to be sneaky about it. So she comes up behind him, and great faith. She knows, if I just touch the garment of the hem of his garment, I will be healed. And that's what happened. Now, we have a pushy Jesus here. Well, in the sense that here's this woman, she's in this precarious position, and what does Jesus do? He outs her.
Yeah.
He says, and I believe right from the minute it happened, he knew who had touched the hem of his garment, but he tells the disciples, somebody touched my garment. I felt the power go out of me. And the disciples saying, "Lord, there are people all around you, who you think you're going to find out who it was." And Jesus is persistent. And eventually the woman comes up, and I think she says, "But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth." Yes, John.
This is similar to the story of the lepers.
Sure.
The lepers would say, "Oh, stay away from us." They would warn people.
Yeah. So leprosy was also considered an illness that made you impure, ritually impure. And in fact, lepers were ostracized out of the community, as this woman would have been. This woman could not go out in public in wherever her hometown was. It would just not have been allowed. And if you were a leper and somebody started walking toward you, you were required to put your hand over your upper lip and just shout, "Unclean, unclean." Now imagine going through life with the message that you're unclean, and over and over again. Part of you says, "I'm a decent person," but you've got all of these voices saying, "You're not good enough, you're bad," and I'm sorry, but that is using faith as a weapon. It is not cool, to put it theologically, to use faith as a weapon like that. And so again, though, knowing the reality in the situation, why didn't Jesus just let her go on her merry way?
I think she probably feels better now. I mean, a lot of time, she got a chance to tell,
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate rabbi, like her
Mhm.
whole problem and her
Mhm.
burden, and she might have said her feelings a little bit, and
Yeah.
then said, "Your faith, like you did it now."
Yeah.
Like what you
Okay.
did all the time.
Mhm.
Like your faith has made you well.
Yes. Yep.
They didn't say like, "I have healed you."
Right.
It's like you did this positive thing by
Mhm.
touching my robe.
Mhm. Yep.
Go in peace.
Yep.
Proud of yourself. You're healed.
That's right.
Everybody heard it.
Yep.
Everybody knew now. Like there was like nothing to hide.
And
It's out in the open. So
and notice what Jesus says to her, how he addresses her. What's a daughter? Okay. A lot of times Jesus will say, woman. Okay. But he says daughter. And what's the message there?
Closer relationship.
Yeah, it's empowering the relationship. Woman, it's more standoffish. Okay. And Leslie, you said something interesting. I think we all agree that Jesus outs the woman to help her. Okay, so she can embrace herself. He calls her daughter. He says, your faith has made you well. All these things, he's commending her, okay? But is it possible that he also, quote, outs her
Yeah,
because he's sending a message to the crowd?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think he's saying a message sending a message to the people in the crowd and basically saying, shame on you.
Yeah, love life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Jesus is a teacher, he's a rabbi. He's always teaching in every dimension, and that's the hard thing sometimes to follow. We follow the focus of one thing,
Mm-hmm,
and he's doing so much all at once.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yep.
When you're saying shame on you, you're saying shame to the crowd.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's
He's saying, I accepted her, you should.
yeah. Look, your attitudes, look what you've done to this poor woman, okay? She's had to live her life in fear and shame and loneliness, absolutely. And Jesus is saying, that's not right, okay? How you've been treating this woman is not right.
How do we know she's Jewish?
She would have been,
At that time.
yeah, it's in Jewish territory, so yeah, it isn't specifically stated, but it's implied.
So we're basically kind of assuming that the crowd who is following Jesus or flocking around
Right.
Jesus would be.
And he's in Galilee at this point. Yeah,
A lot of times if it's not a Jewish person.
they that's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, or the centurion.
Yeah.
That's right. So if it isn't said, it's assumed that the person is Jewish, because you're right. Otherwise, it's specifically stated this woman was a Canaanite woman, or a Syrophoenician woman, or a Samaritan, or a Roman centurion.
We don't know 100%.
But it's a safe conclusion to say that she was definitely Jewish. So Jesus, there's a reason why he does things, and in this case, it's to do two things. He's killing two birds with one stone, or empowering one bird and putting the other bird back in its place. He's affirming the woman, and he's also sending a message to the crowd. And it's basically, don't do that. You're using your faith to put this woman down, to make her life a living hell. Don't do that. Okay?
A lot of the things that Jesus did was not to put down the religious practices of the day, but to put them in perspective more. When
Sure.
he healed on the Sabbath, I mean, a person said, well, sorry, we're rigidly saying you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the person's sick, take care of him.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
He tried to teach common sense.
Yeah. Well, so healing on the Sabbath, there were several instances where the Pharisees gave him a hard time, and he, told them the story about, which of you having a lamb that falls into a ditch on the Sabbath will go out and get the lamb and bring it back. Well, that was considered work by the Pharisees on a number of levels. First of all, you were only allowed to take so many steps on the Sabbath. I forget what it was, because anything long, picking up your child. Some rabbis said that was work. Okay, so definitely walking a distance to find your lost lamb, and then carrying it out of a ditch or something is work. And Jesus is saying, oh, you'll do that. And what you're saying is the life of a lamb that you own is more important than the life of this person who's sick.
In colonial days, when the Pilgrims were first here, their church services were long.
Mm-hmm.
And you were required to be at church. It was noted if you weren't there.
Sure.
If you were late. And if you showed up in work clothes because you didn't get all of your work done, you came and you were late, you were whipped.
Yep.
You show disrespect to God.
Right.
By lousy clothes.
Yep. So let me ask you this question. What does this story have to say to us today?
Don't be narrow-minded.
Don't be narrow-minded. Okay.
Except all people.
accept all people.
We need it today, even with disabilities and stuff.
Disabilities, yes.
Well, we do have a big problem, not in our church, so
Mhm.
much as in the country, of people, trying to follow the letter of some of the parts of the Bible
Mhm.
without looking at what it actually
Mhm.
means,
Yep.
taking it in
Yep.
context and looking at the whole of the word kind of thing.
Yep.
And using it to put down people they don't like,
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ people,
Mhm.
trans,
Mhm.
whatever.
Yep.
Minorities, whatever.
Yep.
So
So,
that's-
anybody's-
I mean, this is exactly what he's talking about.
Mhm.
You're taking the words that God, gave down to you, and
Yep.
you're perverting them.
Yep.
And you're just like too caught up in the minutia and
Yep.
rule following to
Mhm.
like be thinking about the spirit of
Yep.
the things that we're taught, it's supposed to be
Did
helping you.
Did any of you see the video of the guy down in, he's from Barnstable, but he has a restaurant in Hyannis.
Oh, yeah.
And last name is Shea. I didn't remember the first name. I'm gonna use it in the sermon Sunday. Anyways, he was driving his vehicle and he was drunk. So a black man called the police out of concern that this guy was gonna kill somebody or injure somebody, or even was a danger to himself. And so this white guy starts harassing the guy who called, who was black, used the N-word, threatened to get a gun, said, "Get out of my town," my town, not our town. Who wrote that song, that book, Our Town? Oh, there was
I know what's the name of Our Town is the name of the play.
Yeah,
Of the-
I know. Yeah. Yeah. But, and you can see him at one point, he deliberately steps on
Yeah.
the guy's feet,
And somebody videoed it.
which is assault.
Yeah.
It's assault.
On the black guy's foot.
Yeah, stepped on the black guy. Yeah, the black guy says, you're stepping on my foot. And the Shay says, "Yes, I know I'm stepping on your foot."
And this guy was drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The white guy.
Yep.
But he owned several businesses in this town, and he was a prominent citizen. So therefore, he gave him a perfect right to
Mhm.
take away that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And look at,
Sounds fair to me.
yeah, right. Sounds fair. And look at, what's going on right now at Target. Target has had to remove some of its gay pride merchandise because customers were coming into the store and knocking over displays and threatening employees. So they did a couple of things. They removed some more questionable items, questionable in the eyes of the people who were complaining and attacking, and they moved some of the merchandise out of the front windows to the back of the store. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't it? What's that?
I wouldn't have.
I wouldn't have. Yeah.
Well, I guess they're worried about their employees.
Yeah. Well, but that's the other side of the coin, okay? And I think we need to be equal opportunity judges here, because when Target started making these changes because of people coming in and knocking displays over and threatening employees, a number of stores in the Midwest got bomb threats. Not from the people who were knocking over the merchandise, from the people who were mad at Target for giving in to them. Okay, so the people who were supporting Target called bomb threats in. So I mean, if you're going to condemn one behavior, you've got to condemn the other behavior too. Yeah.
People from,
Sitting or picketing or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
sales rep for Bud Light
Yep.
representatives.
Yep.
Who will come around
Mhm.
to,
The
that-
Anheuser-Busch.
have actually been threatened by people who've seen their trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And that I discovered a dreadful site on the internet called Book,
Mm-hmm.
and has a whole list of books that they consider undesirable.
Mm-hmm.
You can look up the title of the book. You can find a paragraph or a passage in it that these folks would find objectionable, and it gives and then you can go and it gives you all the steps you need with sample letters about how to get the book banned.
Mm.
And then finally, the thing is that the last thing is, and you can join a chapter of Mothers Freedom, and you can what you do now is last resort is you vote in new library trustees.
And what?
You vote in new
Oh,
library trustees.
New library
Just had that
trustees.
happen. In Middleton.
Yeah,
We just had that happen.
really?
And 2 school committee people.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 schools.
And this from the former head librarian in Middleton. Yep. So, there's a difference between guilt and shame. We use the words interchangeably, but they're two very different things, okay? There was a guy who had a show on PBS, and I think his name was John Bradshaw. And he said, John Bradshaw on the Family or something like that. And he put it very succinctly and very well. He said, guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake. And, look, Jesus is all in favor of guilt. I mean, he called out the Pharisees when they behaved wrong, even with the woman caught in adultery, the famous let him without sin cast the first stone. Okay. And do you know that if you look in the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, you will not find that story? Mm-hmm. You go to I can always get it mixed up if it's chapter 8 verses 1 through 12 or chapter 12 verses 1 through 8. It's one of the two. Actually, I'll find it here. Hold on.
It's chapter 12, 1 through 8, but that's just one chapter.
That what?
I think it's chapter 12, 1 through 8.
How do you know that,
I
Andy?
don't know. It's just something that I
Maybe
So-
you remembered from a previous.
Okay.
yeah,
Let me see.
I don't know
Yep.
whether it was from a life of shame or life of guilt.
Okay. So here it is. It is chapter 8. And let me find the Revised Standard Version. Well, so
It says reference C section.
interesting. This has it, but it says it says the most ancient authorities omit chapter 7, verse 53 through 8:11, and you go and you get to chapter 8, and it starts with verse 12, and the reason why is we believe that some of the early church fathers thought this story was scandalous because it looked like Jesus was being soft on immorality. Yeah. But here's the thing.
Who are they to judge Jesus?
Well, yeah. So after everybody drops their stones and walks away, verse 10, Jesus looked up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and do not sin again." So Jesus is calling her out. He's saying, you have sinned, but I'm not going to condemn you. And by the way, there's this fascinating little feature in the story when they bring the woman to Jesus and they say, Moses says in the law that we are supposed to stone a woman like this to death. And what do you say? And they think that they have Jesus in a conundrum, because if he says don't stone her, then he is looking like he's soft on immorality. If he does say go ahead and stone her, they can then run to the Roman governor and say, hey, he told us to stone this woman, and only Rome can put someone to death. So they think they have Jesus in a
Always thought they could outfox him.
yeah. So what happens is Jesus says, what does the law say? And then that's when they say, Moses told us in the law that we should stone the woman to death. And then it says, Jesus says, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And then it says he knelt down and he began to write in the ground. And what we believe is that when Jesus did that, he was writing out the actual commandment, word for word. And the actual commandment says that you're supposed to stone the woman and the man. Okay. Now they couldn't say that they didn't know who the man was, because teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. So they caught her, so it's the old double standard. They dragged the woman before Jesus and let the guy go home. So when Jesus writes that out and they realize they're hypocrites because they let the man go, they realize that they are full of sin as well. And that's why they drop the rocks and walk away. Okay. But, and it's interesting because here they are using, again, faith as a weapon. They don't really care that this woman has been caught with adultery. What they're really after is a bigger fish, They're after Jesus. And so they're using the faith and the commandment as a weapon to try to get Jesus into trouble. And, that's what we're seeing today is people of faith using that faith as a weapon to do, what happened to this woman, to fill people with shame.
This is written in depth by a book I have mentioned and would recommend, but it's a horribly long book, Cast.
Cast?
Caste. It was one of the longest bestsellers books, and recommended by everybody about 4 or 5 years ago. I think.
I think that's.
It's powerful.
Yeah, I think it's isn't it case? Yeah.
Caste.
Caste, like the case system in India.
Yes, they call it caste or case, depending on the pronunciation, depending on what part of the country y'all from.
I guess so.
Y'all
We always said caste, the caste system of India.
Oh, no, I always thought it was cased.
I thought it was
But
cast.
that book directly deals with what we're talking about, and it refers to the history and the current day. It is the woman who wrote it. She was so articulate and so clear in how she described it. I would recommend it to anybody to understand our current day problems.
Yep. So I guess the question then is, here's the problem. What do we do about it?
We speak up
Speak up. Okay.
for what we believe in. Each one of us has to. That's one of the biggest mistakes and fears today is the fact that there are things going on. So, well, that's not right, or I don't want to be part of that. More than that, we have to speak up. We have an obligation to.
I think we do.
Gail had a good, nice post, I think on the first, because it's Pride Month, and she had a post on Facebook about how everybody was like welcome and stuff like that. So I mean, just even that's a way to, because people, the bad people make the news all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to try to amplify.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's making this worse is social media. Social media. And, I have a simple solution to clean up social media. You set it up so that it is impossible for someone to post a comment. unless the post includes their real name and address.
That would take care of that.
That will, because anonymous,
You can't hide behind it.
yeah, they're spewing hate and venom, and they don't have to take any responsibility for it, you know? Yeah, I think we have to, well, here's the other thing too, I'll say. When somebody is full of rage and it's directed at you, what is the hardest thing not to do? Rage back.
Yeah, get angry and return.
Rage back. And I think that, we have to be careful that we don't get dragged down into the,
My response always to that, to the hate or anger when it comes is smile. It absolutely ruins them.
I say thank you, and I can't believe it.
Kill them with kindness.
kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
Well, Apostle Paul said, do not become overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
That's right.
Yeah. And, I think it's going to get worse. I really do. And you have politicians
We got a year and a half.
that are stoking those flames. And, if woke means being open to a discussion about the way race has been used in this country, then you can call me fully woke.
I had a friend the other day asking what I thought woke meant.
Yeah,
And I really didn't know how to define it.
yeah,
So I said, anything even the far right doesn't like.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the only way I
You know,
couldn't define it.
yeah. And if you think,
People like commies anymore.
yeah,
So this is like their new, like, oh, that person's a commie.
Well, you
Like a
remember
blacklist,
remember what it was about 4 or 5 years ago?
Like a woke list,
Remember what it was about? A dog whistle. They get people all riled up. Do you know what the pejorative term was 4 or 5 years ago?
Liberal,
What's that?
liberal.
Well, liberal, but no. Remember, people who were quote unquote progressive were being called snowflakes.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
called snowflakes.
Yeah, they were called
Yeah.
snowflakes.
Yeah.
I think that's a little different.
Yeah.
We got people that like dish it out but can't take it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep.
That's true.
So I'll give you an example of again, hypocrisy. If you may remember in the dark days of COVID, and of course the governor of Florida was very anti-mask.
Yeah.
Government should not be telling you have to wear a mask.
Right.
Well, the government then should not also be telling you that you can't wear a mask.
Right.
And there's this famous encounter that he had with some college students, and they were wearing masks. And he looked at them, he said, take those masks off. And I remember thinking, really? So it's do what I tell you to do.
No personal choice.
Yeah.
Really?
Unless it's a personal choice that I want you to make.
Exactly,
That's a whole
because
different
he embodies the idea of an authoritarian ruler.
Yeah. So again, there's a danger when you deal with this.
I never heard of a governor in my life that was so out to like ruin his state and hurt all his people.
Well, or watching it in action.
I know, like first that, now the Disney's like the biggest private employer in the state, and he,
Oh.
like, already they canceled the project,
Yeah.
a big project that
It
was
was-
a chance
It's just like, I'm gonna get you and your dog too, I
200,000
mean,
people
it's,
here,
Yes, Don.
One of the witnesses on the January 6th committee was the public relations person for the Oath Keepers.
Yeah.
And when he was interviewed, I just finished reading his book,
Uh-huh.
and when he was interviewed, he went through in his book the whole description of the process of getting to being interviewed by them, the fact that he felt he should have a lawyer, and going in through the back entrances to there were guards and everything. You had to go through checkpoints and everything. On his way out from having done his testimony, the guards were thanking him.
What guys?
The guards.
Oh, guards.
We're thanking him, and he says, "Why are you thanking me? You're protecting me." He says,
Mhm.
"No, you're protecting us because you're saying what needs to be said
Mhm.
to the public." And the only reason, as having been the Oath Keeper's voice, because he's a good writer, I must say that, a very strange person, but a good writer. And the only reason he changed, he was in the Northwest, and he was at a meeting of the political group out there, similar to the Oath Keepers, because he wrote about all the other groups too.
Mhm.
And he just went out to check out a meeting that was gonna be held, and he was at a bar, and these people were talking, and they were all talking about the fact that the Holocaust was an illusion.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
An illusion, the Holocaust.
And that woke him up. He
Mhm.
said.
Oh, is he woke now?
He just happened to be, well, and he used the term too.
Yeah.
But he said, this is just not, and it just made his head spin. And that's when he changed from one side, if you will, to the other. He wasn't for the Oath Keepers.
Yeah.
The Oath Keepers, but he wrote for them. He was just totally open-minded, and he said, that's the biggest mistake you can make, to allow it to go on. He said,
Well,
we have to speak out against it.
remember-
That was his whole theme. You have to open your mouth and speak, because if you don't, the other side will walk all over you.
It's fine.
And that's, you've got to get it right out there. all
I
the time.
remember what Martin Luther King Jr. said. Said sometimes the only thing bad people need to succeed is for good people to do nothing.
He even quoted that in his book, yes.
And then there's the famous quote, I believe it's by Martin Niemöller. And he was a German pastor during World War II. He was part of the, I always get it confused, Barmen Declaration or the Bremen Declaration. I never pronounce it right. This was a group of Christians who got together and issued a declaration that said that National Socialism was evil. So Martin Niemöller had a great quote. He said, first they came for the Jews, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. And I think he said, and then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Catholic. And then he ended by saying, and then they came for me, and by that time there was nobody left to say anything. You
And
know?
that was quoted in the book Cass.
Was it?
The woman who wrote the book and a number of other people who are concerned about what's happening in this country now happen to be living in Berlin now.
Where?
Berlin.
Oh, Berlin, yeah.
Because Germany's attitude about what happened wasn't to bury it, it was to eradicate it. And their approach to it is quite different than ours. We hide the Jim Crow South, we hide those things, or we forgive them. They don't forgive any of it. They factually state everything that happened, and then they don't talk about it. They don't hide it if it comes up as there. They go forward and leave it buried.
So I got while back, I got a note from a grandmother thanking me, and I had a mixed reaction to it. In one sense, it made me very proud. I don't know if that's the right word. In one sense, it made me happy. In another sense, it made me very sad. In the note, the grandmother thanked me for working to make this a community of faith. And I should say that she has a granddaughter who is biracial. And she said, I want to thank you for making this a community where my daughter is loved and accepted. And so you can see how I have a mixed reaction. On the one hand, like, yeah, that's who we really need to be. But on the other hand, that we have to be intentional about that in the society we live in is very sad. It's very sad. So,
I probably said too many times around, one of the worst words we have in the English language is labels.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, a person doesn't stand out until you label them. That's hard to explain to people.
Even
We are all the same until we start to label, then we start to divide people. And labels are probably the most dangerous things we can do.
Yeah.
even
Like the
nicknames.
speeches.
What's that?
Even like the speeches.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Say it.
You know,
The Dr. Seuss and the ones that the stars and the others didn't have the stars.
well, there's also the Dr. Seuss book, The Great Butter Battle. And it's two groups, and one buttered their bread on the top and one buttered their bread on the bottom, and they just didn't get along and everything. You know, I was also thinking of a video. It's from the Nooma series, Nooma, which is a variation of Pneuma. And Pneuma, Pneuma, is the Greek word for spirit.
Oh,
Okay, and it's also where we get the word for pneumonia.
right.
And
I love me some pneumatic tubes.
what's that?
I love pneumatic tubes.
A pneumatic? Yeah, it's okay. And it's a pneumatic tube is air pressure. Okay, so the reason why the illness is called pneumonia is because if somebody has pneumonia and you listen to their lungs, it sounds like a wind going through a cave. Okay, and what is the spirit, or how is the spirit described on that day of Pentecost? The rush of a mighty wind, pneuma. Okay, so Nooma is a variation of pneuma, spirit, and put together by Rob Bell, who was this amazing pastor who started the Mars Hills congregation, I think out in Minnesota. He was in his 20s, and there were like 12,000 members of this church. And he did these videos, and very well done. And he has this one about labels, and and all you see are different people, different nationalities and things, and they have these T-shirts on with one words on the back, like, well, not just one word, but one descriptive phrase, a word, drug addict or loser and things like that. And I don't remember how it ends, but he always would do these things in a way that really would make you stop, think, oh, wow. The other one I remember talks about, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? Mm-hmm. And he's in his study, and it's snowing outside, and you could see across the street this older woman shoveling. And you keep thinking, why doesn't he go over and help her shovel? And he goes out to get his mail, and she's still shoveling and everything. And then he goes in and he finishes the video. He looks out the window, and the woman finishes shoveling the driveway, and it goes into the house next door.
Oh,
Wasn't that powerful?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. He does these videos, and they're really, really powerful. We should do what I think I'll do is maybe over the summer we'll do a Pneuma series. I'll show some of these videos, and we can talk about them. He has a whole bunch of them.
Rick,
Mhm.
I was just going to say, speaking of the unexpected, I was delighted to see in the Bible study announcement the David LaChapelle Last Supper, Tableau Vivant, which he brilliantly photographs. And this is from a series of images that he calls Jesus is my homeboy. And it just has these wonderful, unexpected scenes, and it shows a a young woman with long blonde hair.
Mhm.
Jesus is sitting in a very ordinary kitchen,
Mhm.
and she is washing his feet and drying
Mhm.
drying his feet with her long hair. And there's also another one where he appears to the disciples after the crucifixion, showing his pains.
Yeah.
But the wonderful one of the Last Supper is just absolutely wonderful, because it's all the people.
Yeah.
That people would. I'm not going to sit even on the subway. I'm not going to
Yeah.
sit next to that person or look at their tattoos or
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
making all the wrong assumptions about how the people are.
So that was the photo I included in the email. I think I might use it in the sermon, but he did it in 2003. It's called The Last Supper. He said it was not intended to offend. Rather, it was an attempt to rescue the Jesus he knew from fundamentalist Christians who use him to judge and condemn others. You know?
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, and I think, maybe that's the thing. That's the I always would tell our student ministers, if you can't tell me what the sermon is going to be in one sentence, you're not ready to preach it. And maybe the way to put it is Jesus is not meant to be a weapon. Yep. So I thank you all.
All right, let's go anyway. Our birthday boy.
Uh-oh.